What did you find out about your husband only after you got married? All the time we were together before, I probably would have said I would have liked a little more traditional romance. But I appreciated how straightforward and pragmatic he was about other things and thought, I can't have it both ways. He always said he thought marriage was essentially meaningless. Eventually, for external reasons, we decided to do it. We threw together a cheap little ceremony in a few weeks to get it over with, as we both put it. He put on his suit. I put on my pretty dress. We had the officiant there and got started. However, when it came time for the vows and the ring exchange, I suddenly found myself facing a very sentimental man who was clearly deeply in love with me and overjoyed to be marrying me. After that, the same man who took years to feel comfortable holding my hand in public for even 5 minutes was hugging and kissing me in front of everyone at every moment he could during the ceremony. Then, he wanted to celebrate every week of anniversaries, then every month of anniversaries, with romantic dinners and having the same cake we had at our wedding. He starts celebrating at 12:01 a.m. on our anniversaries. What is the most disturbing thing to know? I looked after terminally ill people who had chosen to die at home after being discharged from hospital. After a while, you learn some signs that people are deteriorating. You start to learn how long people generally have left. I always went with honesty. I felt it was my job to support the patients' families as well as the patients. So if they asked how long I thought they had left, I would answer honestly based on my previous experiences. The wife of one of my patients told me that their children were visiting the following weekend to say their goodbyes. I chose to recommend that they visit the following day. I regretted saying it because she was devastated. She took my advice, and her husband passed away peacefully 48 hours later after seeing his kids. I'm glad I did it. But upsetting that lady was absolutely wrenching. Some people didn't want to know. That was the worst. In those cases, you had to not say anything. Sometimes they'd say, "See you tomorrow," and I had to reply, "Yes, have a good night," knowing full well that they were going to pass of the night. The time my whole class cheated, and I was the only one who got away with it. One time in college, one of my older professors accidentally stapled answer sheets to the back of every test. A few minutes after all the tests were handed out, the teacher took a phone call and stepped outside. At that point, everyone noticed the answer sheet, and we decided to keep quiet and just tear it off when we were done. All the questions were multiple choice, except the last one, which said, "Answers will vary." Once I was done with the test, I went to the podium to turn it in. However, I was curious about what other people wrote for the last question, so I decided to discreetly take a look at some of them. I kid you not, all of the tests I looked at literally said "answers will vary" as their actual answer. I stood there frozen for a second, not believing college kids could be so stupid. Anyway, I passed my test and was never called back. I didn't know anybody in that class, and this was my last test before I graduated, so I never found out if they got caught or not. What made the popular girl lose their popularity? When I was in 6th grade, one of my classmates brought $90 to school. They were going to go shopping after school. She was the most popular girl in class. At some point during the course of the day, the money went missing. Our teacher went right to the superintendent's office, right across the hall from our class. This was a super small school. Within minutes, they had pulled us all out of class and separated out the boys and the girls. The 5th grade teacher took the girls into the bathroom 3 at a time and strip searched them, and the superintendent handled all of us, boys in the boys' bathroom. They didn't find anything. The cops showed up a few hours later and interviewed all of us one by one, and still found nothing. A few weeks later, it got out that she forgot to bring the money to school, and it was home in her bedroom the whole time. Despite us being in a rural area and the next nearest school being 30 miles away, the backlash was bad enough that her parents pulled her out of school and sent her to the next town over. Mountain of lawsuits came down on the superintendent for strip searching kids because it is considered as sexual assault. Lawyers, what's a case you regretted winning? Prosecuted a murder case. 21-year-old kid starts dating an older guy's ex-girlfriend. The older guy, real roughneck, loose connections with a local biker gang, was going all over his small town talking about how he was going to kick the kid's ass. The older guy sends some nudes of the ex while he's getting drunk at a bar, so the kid says something smart-ass in response. Older guy comes to the kid's house to fight him. The kid shoots him once, and the older guy dies. Jury didn't buy self-defense or castle doctrine. Convicted of voluntary manslaughter, 20 years. Burned up his appeals with no luck. I have a son about the kid's age. I could totally imagine him doing the exact same things if he were in a similar situation. Shit's going to haunt me until I die, no doubt about it. Started thinking about other work the moment the verdict came back. What made you lose faith in humanity? I was driving home last night, and while waiting at a traffic light, a police car pulled over an unregistered vehicle in front of me. The car did look a bit suspicious. No number plates and several minor damages at the back. I curiously watched what was happening. An old, frail lady walked out of the car. She was the driver. Her back was hunched, and she looked unsteady. After several minutes of questioning, the police officer gave the old lady a ticket and told her that she should either walk home or have someone pick her up, as her car would be taken away by a tow truck. The traffic light turned green, and I had had to drive off. But instead, I made a U-turn and drove back to the scene. I got out of my car and walked up to the police and the old lady. I felt the urge to say something to the police officers. I asked one, "What if this lady was someone you love? Yes, you are doing your job, but can't you still show a tiny bit of mercy for an older person?" I was told to mind my own business, but I got my message across. I bought the lady a coffee from McDonald's drive-thru, and then I offered her a ride home. She started crying out of happiness. Introverts, how did you meet your girlfriend? She came over for coffee while she was on vacation in my country to ask how to tip. We had a 2-hour conversation, an amazing 5-hour chat 2 days later. She complained about her accommodation, so I offered her my spare bedroom. She accepted. Nothing. Although it seems crystal clear in retrospect, we were falling for each other. I didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable under my roof, so putting the moves was not something I seriously considered. 2 nights later, I had to be on a work assignment for most of the night, and I asked if she would walk my dog in my absence. I came home at 5 a.m. and was greeted by my suddenly very soft, very fluffy dog. She had somehow understood. "Will you please wash my dog?" And apparently, she didn't find it a strange request at all. The next day, after we'd finished a bottle, it seems my apparent indecisiveness took the wine glass out of my hand, put it down, and leaned in for a kiss. That was 26 years ago. We've been together for 23 years. What's something that made you angrier than you've ever been? I'm an elementary school teacher, and I truly believe this next generation is beyond cooked. My students are just 6 years old, yet every single one of them has a smartphone and is completely obsessed with brain-rot social media content. My class is constantly interrupted by kids yelling things like skibidi, gayat, sigma, mewing, riz, and more. But that's not even the worst part. Their memory retention and attention spans are the poorest I've ever encountered in my 20-plus years of teaching. Kids' brains are like sponges at this age, and filling them with this nonsense does lasting damage. Not one of my students enjoys going outside anymore. Apparently, TikTok is more entertaining. I still have a note one of my students wrote when I told him to put away his smartphone. It said, "Are you from Ohio? Because you're a beta, not a sigma. A sigma does skibidi riz, and you don't. Be more gigachad, be more kai sinant, ishao speed, and livy done. I want to watch TikTok to be the Rizzler." I remember sitting in class reading that note and just thinking, where did it all go wrong? Teachers, what's the saddest thing you've discovered about one of your students? My wife, a 4th grade teacher, had a student who wore a jacket every day, even when it was hot outside. The little girl had severe eczema that caused her skin to crack and bleed. She had medication for it, but halfway through the year, her mom stopped filling her prescriptions. Once, after an allergic reaction, the school nurse called the mom. When she arrived, instead of showing concern, the mom berated her daughter for making her leave work, even though an ambulance had already been called. The mom also frequently forgot to pick her up from school, leaving my wife to stay late with the girl until someone, usually her grandmother, could come. The grandmother lived 30 minutes away, while the girl's home was just 5 minutes from school. My wife grew very attached to the little girl, often talking about how much she wanted to adopt her. Child Protective Services were called every year the girl was in school, including twice by my wife, but nothing ever changed. Tragically, just over a year ago, we attended her funeral. She had taken her own life at the age of 13. My wife was devastated, but the hardest part for both of us was listening to her parents speak at the funeral, as if they had been loving, wonderful parents when we knew the truth.
Teachers, how easy it to tell if a student has a crush on another. This is one of my most treasured memories as a teacher. I was a student teacher, so I was not prepared for this. I asked my students to write and share their own poetry. We focused on sensory imagery, and I had the presentations staged at the local university for a bit more gravitas. Some were funny, some were surprisingly beautiful, but most were banal, and the exercise was mostly boring. This one girl got up in front of the class, visibly shaking. She was near tears for her entire poem. I wanted to help her, but I had no idea what to do. So I just watched like everyone else as she poured her heart out to a boy in the class who did not reciprocate. When she finished, there was a silence in the room, and after a few seconds, which seemed to stretch out forever, one of her friends stood up and ushered her out of class as the tears began to flow. Nobody made fun of her, but the boy also didn't show that he felt the same. It was just out there with no commentary. It is to this day one of the bravest acts I have ever witnessed.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.